An old entitled jerk causes problems for me and my neighbor after he ran into my neighbor's car, claiming that my neighbor turned wrong and that it was his fault that this accident occurred. Things got so heated that this old entitled jerk even called the police to try and get us in trouble, but instead he got arrested for drinking and driving. And I'm honestly still blown away by this guy's behavior. Here's what happened. So, my apartment complex's entrance is at the junction of a fairly major intersection. My apartment also faces said intersection, and over the few years I've lived here has provided near endless entertainment due to the overwhelming amount of stupidity in the area. I'm serious, a couple of hours sitting on the porch with a beer in hand provides more enjoyment than any Real Housewives TV show. While crashes do occur, including a tanker truck that overturned fully loaded with tar because the driver was making a turn too fast so he didn't catch the light, I really enjoy the arguments. Of all the things I've witnessed at the intersection, this one that happened last month absolutely takes the cake. My neighbor from the other building was on his way home just like any other day. He turned on his blinker, slowed down to turn into the complex, and there was a car right on his tail as he slowed down. And the moment he turned in to drive, the car behind him bumped into him. Now, for clarity's sake, it was the most minor of minor accidents. So they both turn into the complex and park in front of my apartment. The entitled jerk who hit my neighbor gets out of his car screaming. This guy has a popular red hat on his head with an oxygen bottle in tow. His grievance was that my neighbor had made an illegal turn because he had never seen anyone use that entrance before. Now, my neighbor, not really wanting to deal with this guy, looked at his car, told the guy there really isn't any damage as there really wasn't, and that he should try to be more careful next time. But it was like something had exploded. This entitled jerk comes unglued, screaming and saying awful things to my neighbor, saying that he has a weapon on him and he feels like his neighbor is trying to hurt him. And that's old person Florida speak for them basically saying that they're gonna try to take you out with zero consequences. So I put on my veteran's hat, and over the years I found that seeing that hat will typically soothe the most severe entitled old jerk bellyaches, and it will slightly bring them back to reality. I also put my own personal protection item on my side in a very visible fashion as a show of force, and I walk out just to check on my neighbor. I ask my neighbor, hey, is everything okay? And before he could respond, the entitled old jerk interjects, absolutely screaming about his grievances. Through the screaming, he says that he's fine. The car is fine, and the only thing that isn't fine is the screaming old entitled jerk. So I look at the guy and say the same thing that my neighbor did, that there is not much damage here, and I curtly told him that he needs to leave. Well, this old entitled jerk then gets in my face, like maybe 3 inches away, and says that we don't get to tell him what to do, and that he is going to call the police and have us arrested. Now, while he was in my face, I could smell alcohol on his breath. So I smiled and I told him, okay, go ahead and do what you've got to do. And you know what? Amazingly, he actually calls the police himself. He says that there was an accident that he was not at fault of, and that he was badly injured. A few minutes later, there was police, ambulance, and fire trucks at the scene of this major accident that clearly required such a response. The police take all the statements, including mine, which I mentioned that I smelled alcohol on his breath because he was 3 inches away from my face trying to intimidate me. The police take this information and do a field sobriety test, which he clearly failed and was arrested on the spot. And I honestly couldn't believe what I had just witnessed. This entitled old jerk causes minor damage while drinking. He refuses to accept responsibility because someone turned in a way that he had never seen before, and therefore, according to him, shouldn't be allowed to do that. He was also given 2 opportunities to leave. He says more awful things, and then literally calls the police on himself and gets arrested for causing an accident while under the influence. So I'm honestly very glad that this old entitled jerk got his social status upgraded to that of a felon. Wow, that guy was completely out of line. Like seriously, he's trying to make these unhinged remarks towards the neighbor and the original poster, while also lying and being like, oh, I feel threatened, I might have to defend myself. And the original poster is 100% right. This old entitled jerk was clearly looking for problems. And thankfully, when he called the police on himself, he found all the problems he could ever want. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to AmITheJerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I in the wrong for having a grudge against my father and my mother, all because of the way they treated me growing up? Because right now, after looking back on everything, I'm seriously feeling so lost and I really don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so I have a difficult relationship with my father, and this is one that is the main source of my anxiety in my own house. I have a grudge against him for the things he's done in the past, but when I say I have grudges, people tell me I'm a spoiled daughter and I should value him more. So I came here to to ask if I am indeed a spoiled daughter, or is it normal to have the feelings that I do? For starters, ever since I was a kid, I was really shy and a very sensitive girl. I had a lot of problems making friends, and I was bullied a lot. My mother always knew something wrong was happening inside school, but everyone told her that she was crazy because I refused to tell the truth. And one of the persons who refused to believe my mother was my father, who supported the idea of me staying in the school even after I confessed that I was being bullied. Now, this problem of making friends basically followed me from my childhood into my teenage years. When I felt really low and I needed to talk, I only had my father to talk to, but his only advice would be that I was too sensitive and that friends don't exist, and I only go to school to study and not to make friends. It was cruel because I was an excellent student. I loved my teachers because I had the highest rates, and I always concentrated during class. I just wanted my father to hear me and give me advice and not try to sink me lower. To this day, I have problems opening up emotionally to him because when I express discomfort or something painful that he has done, he just dismisses it and tells me to become an adult. But part of being an adult is expressing if you've done something wrong to me. Ironically enough, at the age of 11, I started to be my father's therapist. Now, for context, my father has a really bad relationship with his in-laws, and he says that if it wasn't for them, there would never be any marital problems. So, with this premise, he decided to start telling me who was behind a mask of friendliness on my mother's side of the family and to take me as his ally on his personal crusade. So, I would spy on my mother's call with my grandma and say phrases prefabricated by my father when needed to. And I started hearing every day in the car for hours how the family was awful and that we were protecting my mother. At the moment, I was really immature, and I saw everything like a game of spies, saying phrases like, "Oh, are we winning, Dad?" Almost as if we're fighting against bad guys. And yes, I know it's super cringe. Now, from my point of view, yes, her family is absolute garbage, but all his hate against them is a reflection of his behavior, because he also manipulates and lies to my mother. Now, all of this was behind my mother's back, and my father told me that if I told her, it would be my fault if the family broke up. And now, with almost 20 years, I see that the only deep conversation I've ever had with my father were about his marital problems. In fact, at the age of 15, all these feelings of me playing against the bad guys transformed into hate towards my mother and her family. I felt like she was an idiot and that she didn't want to protect us from her toxic family. Also, I was expecting my father to divorce her at any time, and that's the topic he always was talking about when we were alone. And strangely, at home, he would act as if nothing actually happened. But I didn't say anything. I had the mentality that Dad is perfect and I'm just an idiot. And how could I ever begin to doubt him? My family would be destroyed. Well, one day I overheard a conversation between my grandma and my father, and my mother decided to tell me what it was completely. And that broke the halo of perfection with which I have always viewed my father to this day. When my mother and grandmother moved to Latin America, to my country, she suffered all numbers of atrocity by my father and his family. So much so that she had to move to the street while she was pregnant with me. A few months later, I was born while living in a shelter for women, and as my father promised to change, we returned to his home. Now, I have to say that yes, he did change, and everything was better between them, and they even had my little brother, but that doesn't make the revelation of this secret a before and after for my life. The man who seemed to me to be the perfect father and who rightly made me feel like I was an idiot in the end was, in his past, someone who was really an awful person. It was all just a complete lie. Now, I didn't know who I could trust, my father's family or my mother's family. I was in shock, and this was the first and only marital problem I knew from my mother. I kept acting as normal with my father, but I felt so sad and betrayed that one day I just exploded, and I told him in secret what I had heard, and he decided to tell me his version of everything, claiming that my mother was never mistreated or manipulated. And all of this was some awful plan from my grandma to control the family, that she decided to invent that my father didn't want us at home, and that's why we lived in the streets, and that this way my grandmother would keep us away from my father's influence, and that this way she could use us. Meanwhile, his family was perfect and never did anything wrong. So now I was really divided, because obviously this was really biased. After all this garbage on every family dispute, my mother in secret tells me to support her, while my father in secret tells me to support his truth. And I feel in the middle of a crossfire. Some years ago, I was battling a depression, but I didn't know how I had it, and I was always crying and so sad. At the end, I could go to a therapist, but my father always refused to get me help. When I ended up going, he would always say passive-aggressive things. Stuff like, "You tell her all our secrets, I bet." And I'm glad I went there because I proved and discovered what I really wanted to be. I wanted to be a therapist when I grew up. stop. At 17, I was about to enter university, and my father was obsessed with the idea of me becoming a doctor. I mean, it was his childhood dream after all. Now, I didn't do it because I knew he wanted me to do it just to make his own dreams come true, and because I wanted to study psychology. I mean, I was practically his own therapist already, so why not just make money out of it? However, he told me that under no circumstances was he going to ever let me study it. Now, I partly understood this because the only options to study this career were to go to another island in my archipelago so that I could go to a public university or pay for a private university here, and both options were very expensive. In addition, they told me that if I studied what they wanted so much, they would let me live independently in a flat that they had in the city. Now, I was delighted because they were very controlling, meaning that they had a GPS and they would get angry if I don't take their calls instantly, but I was a total idiot. So I accepted this deal because they never gave me the flat. According to my parents, it was because the arrangements were too expensive and they decided to rent it out to get the money back, which is understandable, but according to my father on my mother's back, it was because he didn't see me ready. He literally just told me to get lost. They've been saying for years, oh, we'll give you the flat, but I don't even want it anymore. I mean, seriously, what for? Even if I had it, I would just be blackmailed again. Not to mention that I'm really controlled by my father, as I said before, to the point that he doesn't even want me to get a car license. It's honestly all so messy, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Yeah, it really sounds like both your parents are just completely terrible people, and they've been taking advantage of you and manipulating you pretty much your entire life. Like both of them, more so your father, have been using you against each other pretty much their entire marriage, even if it's in more subtle ways from your mom or more obvious awful ways from your dad. So no, I don't think what your dad is saying about you is correct, and I don't think there's anything wrong with you being cautious towards your dad moving forward, because the way he treated you as well as the way your mom has treated you, in my opinion, is completely inappropriate. An entitled customer tries to tell me that I don't know how to do my job, despite the fact that they have no idea what they're talking about, thus leaving me completely baffled at their stupidity. Here's what happened. So I currently work as a dispense tech at a pretty busy pharmacy, and I'm currently in my second year of bachelor's for pharmacy. I've been working at this pharmacy for over a year now, so it's safe to say that I know my way around medicines, especially since it's what I'm studying as well. Anyways, an elderly lady comes in and asks for someone that knows Mandarin so she can get some help deciphering her medications that she wants from her scripts, as this lady does not speak a wink of English. So I come over and I help her out. Now, it's important to note that I do come from a Chinese background and I can't speak Mandarin as it is my first language. However, I have stayed in Australia for long enough that I'm more fluent in English than I am in Mandarin. She hands me 5 scripts, and 3 of those I offered to get filled, as it seemed like the other 2 scripts are new, and she isn't aware the doctor prescribed her new medications. After a lot of back and forth, she decides out of the 2 new ones, she wants atorvastatin. So I bring the medication box over to her according to the script. She puts it through the Google Translate, and the word atorvastatin is written on the box, and it's translated into the same word as atorvastatin written on the script. But there's a slightly different pronunciation in Mandarin. At this point, I'm baffled. I don't know how to explain to her that if you match the letters on the box, it actually corresponds with the same letters as they appear on the script, because literally they are the same medication. The lady says to me, "You're wrong. What you brought me isn't what's written on the script." I say to her, "This medication is the same thing." She says to me, "You must be new here. You don't know what you're talking about because you're making mistakes. Can you bring me someone else to show me the correct medication?" At this point, I pulled the pharmacist aside to confirm the medication right in front of her, but even then, she just doesn't believe me. So I just offered her to fill the scripts that she was sure of and then leave that one for now. And boy, do I wish the story ended here, but it definitely didn't. For context, in Australia, there are basically 2 healthcare cards, one of which is a basic healthcare card, kind of like Medicare, that is offered to all Australian citizens, and the other is a concession card that only certain people can apply for, which subsidizes a majority of your medication cost. So while I'm dispensing her script, I notice her waving her Medicare card around in front of me, demanding me to put this through the system so that she gets a discount. I explained to her that firstly, I already had her card details, and secondly, the card she's waving around isn't a concession card, and therefore you do not not get discounted medications. And I kid you not, before I even get to finish the sentence, she cuts me off and says, "You're wrong, this does get me discounts." And again, I'm just baffled at this point. And I even point out that what she's waving is a Medicare card and not a concession card. And I asked her if she has a concession card at all. And I can't even make this up. She said back to me, "This is the only card I own. I don't know what you're asking me right now." Now, I'm genuinely fed up by this point, so if she really believes that the wrong card can offer her a discount, then so be it. A few minutes pass and she gets her medications. And lo and behold, the cashier staff rings. And this lady is asking why she doesn't have discounts on her medications. I let them know that she doesn't have a concession card, and just to be safe, to double check with her for the 5th time. Now, I wasn't there for it, but I like to assume that she just walks out after having to pay full price. Now, I normally don't let work affect my daily life, but honestly, this experience completely ruined my day. Oh man, there is nothing worse than dealing with a customer who seriously has no idea what they're talking about. They're sitting there being like, "Oh yeah, I know how to do your job." Meanwhile, they can't even identify the correct medication on the box or on the script. Like, that really is super obnoxious, and there's no good excuse for that. And this is also compounded by the fact that she was acting super obnoxious the entire time. Like, seriously, for her to be like, "Oh, you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about." Like, that is just so rude. I'm pretty sure the person training to be a pharmacist probably has a good handle on how to do their job. So honestly, I think you handled this as well as you possibly could, because the way this lady was acting was completely out of line. An entitled sales rep at my job tries to force me to work while I'm on my vacation, claiming that he's gonna get me in trouble if I don't help him out right away, implying that he could cause me to lose my job. But thankfully, karma was on my side, as this guy got reprimanded and put in his place in a way that I always wish would happen. And I've honestly never felt better about getting back at somebody in my life. Here's what happened. So this happened about 8 years ago, and at the time, I was working for a large company that did all manner of stuff, such as selling cleaning chemicals, pest elimination services, leasing machinery, and a lot of stuff like that. After starting in the customer service team, and boy are there some stories I could share from that time, I made it to the team that handles machine leases and logistics, dealing only with our field sales and service representatives. A lot of our field reps could be entitled jerks at times, and there was a bit of a company culture of praising them as heroes who went out and got us customers, but there was one in particular who we always dreaded dealing with. He would incorrectly fill out leases and then call and scream at us whenever we rejected them. He would demand anything he submitted be put to the front of our work queues, scream at us if we didn't get things done on his timeline, as well as have some of the worst entitled behavior. But unfortunately, since the assistant vice president over the area was a former field rep, he would just ignore our complaints instead of addressing them or even passing them on to the people in charge of the field reps. Fast forward, and 1 year, thanks to a friend, I lucked out and got a pass to San Diego Comic-Con. The day my vacation started, I was sitting in the airport waiting for my flight when my cell phone suddenly rings. I answer it, and it was the entitled rep I was referring to. Now, I was confused as to how I got this phone call because the phone was my personal phone, not a work one, and I had no idea how he got the number. And I barely said hello before he started in on me. He said to me, "I just saw that you rejected a lease that I submitted, and I need you to fix that right now and process it. I promised the customer we would expedite the machine, and if we don't, I will lose this business." I say to him, no, dude, I'm not in the office. I'm on vacation, and this is my personal number. You need to call the office line and someone can help you there." But when I said that, this guy just literally wouldn't take it. He said to me, "I don't have time for that BS, and I don't care that you're on vacation. This is your problem now, and you will fix it right now, or I will report you to the assistant vice president for not doing your job." Well, I responded back by saying, "I am literally sitting in an airport, and I'm going to be boarding a flight in less than 20 minutes. I am not going to the office. I am on vacation. You will not call this number ever again. You messing up a lease is not my problem. See you later. Goodbye." I then hung up, and of course, he called me right back. But rolling my eyes, I ignored the call and I blocked his number. A week later, I am back in the office, and as I'm logging in for the day, my supervisor walks up with a grin on her face. Apparently, the entitled representative had called into the office after I blocked him and demanded to speak to my manager. He tried to spin her some BS to make me look bad, but my supervisor knew me well enough to know that he was full of it. With a few questions, she basically got him to admit on a recorded call that he had dug into our employee files to find my personal number and that he had used that to call me, demanding that I do unpaid work to fix his mistake. And apparently, even with the assistant vice president going to bat for the field field reps, he couldn't actually defend this when it was brought up to HR and the higher-ups. And while this entitled rep wasn't fired, he was forced to give me a written apology for his behavior, and I'm told he was severely chewed out by his supervisors and was written up, putting him in danger of losing his job if he did anything like that again. And every time he called our department after that, he was always very polite and very respectful to us. And I became a bit of a hero for finally getting that guy off of our backs. Wow, I can't believe that guy didn't get fired. Like seriously, this guy dug through your personal information just to find out your personal information to call you directly. And apparently this is all over a mistake that he made in the first place. Like that's insane to me, and there is no good excuse for that. And I know for a fact that if I was getting ready to go on vacation and this guy called me up barking orders at me and being like, oh, you better help me right now or else I'm gonna get you in trouble. Like I would not only be very confused about how he got my number, but also incredibly pissed off. Like I don't know about you, but vacation and personal time off at a job is a sacred time. Nobody interrupts that, nobody gets in the way of that, especially somebody from work who's like an entitled jerk all the time. Because here's the thing, if this person was nicer and had a better attitude towards the people at the main office, I'm positive that some kind of solution could have been brought about that would have solved all these problems right then and there. But it's because this guy's such a massive jerk and he's treated so many people so poorly over the years, that in my opinion would be a major reason why nobody would help him out, whether this was an emergency or not. So truly, I'm so glad that karma came back to bite this guy in the rear end, because his behavior was absolutely unacceptable. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.